Good afternoon. Yes, indeed it is Friday afternoon, and welcome to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute slot every day, but not next week. Unfortunately, I won't be here. I'm heading off up north to Auckland, and I know a lot of people don't like that place, but it's actually a truly incredible place, and the rate of expansion and development up in Auckland now is absolutely phenomenal. It is a country within a country, and it is far more developed, it is evolving, and is far more sophisticated than it ever used to be. It used to be a pretty nasty sort of a sprawl, but it is becoming a far more interesting place now, and it's got a hell of a lot going for it. And I'm also going to sneak off for a few days to the Coromandel in Tauranga, get a little bit of fishing in. It's something that I really love, and I find it really good for the mental health to be near the sea, the sound, the waves, catching fish, feeling self-empowered, because when you're suffering from depression, you feel like a lot of the power is being taken away from you, sucked out of you, and sometimes we all feel quite helpless and lost, and it's a good place to find yourself, and especially if you can spend a bit of time with friends. It's a nice way to spend your time, but even being by yourself, I used to do a lot of fishing years ago. I used to even go out and fish all night down at Lake Ferry and that, it's a great place just to sit and have a smoke and watch the stars and snaffle a few fish, and it's a really great way to go. And I just find it really helpful. And in case you're wondering and you've never seen this show before, this is the Road to Recovery. This is about mental health issues, and a few ideas on how to deal with them, but also to try to encourage other people who are okay but maybe know someone who's suffering, or alternatively see someone who's suffering, because one of the things that really makes me despair over the years is how selfish and greedy our people have become, how self-absorbed. And I always say you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And that is the problem, the degree of selfishness, because capitalism does not serve us well. Never did, never will. It's not designed to. It's designed to reward only the few at the top of the pyramid while all the rest of them suffer. And unfortunately, we have seen increases in mental health problems, depression, suicides, deaths on the roads, and a lot of it comes down to that. We are splintering ourselves apart, and young people who feel all this pressure about how the world's going to hell in a handbag, it's all going to burn, they can't afford a house, they can't get a job, they've got no money. And so, the mental pressure builds up, and many people get depressed, and unfortunately some of them even commit suicide. And the fallout from that, the devastation it causes amongst families, goes on for decades afterwards. It is a terrible, terrible tragedy when a fine young person feels that they've got to end their lives, and all the things they'll never get to see and never get to do. They may never get to have kids and see them grow up, and all the fantastic things in life. And I really believe that they deserve better than just being shunted into a hole in the ground before their time. Surely we can do better than that as a people. Surely we judge ourselves by how well we look after those less fortunate than ourselves. That is the true measure of character and how good we are as a people. I really don't give a shit about gross national product. My deal is about gross national happiness. It's about looking after each other. And when you consider It costs you nothing to be an a-hole, but it also costs you nothing to be nice. If you're in an intersection, just let someone through. Don't sit there, block the road and stare blankly in front of you as if someone doesn't exist. You might as well just spit in their face. You know, it took me an hour and a half instead of an hour to get here because of how bad our driving is, and it is just terrible. As I was coming over the Rimatakas, there's 3 different holes in the barriers where people have smashed through. And I just think, dear, oh dear, oh dear, what led you to do that? Are you really that bad? And I mean, our driving, I've driven all over the place, Southeast Asia, Africa, Europe, you name it, and ours is some of the worst in the world. And that is because we use amateurs who are poor drivers with lots of bad habits to teach young people who don't know anything at all. And so they become what their trainers were, which is very poor indeed, to the point of being extraordinarily dangerous. I find that hardly anyone can stick to the speed limit. They're either 30 under or 30 over. They just can't seem to follow the rules. So, you know, I don't believe in just throwing stones for the hell of it. The alternative is, of course, that every single young person trains under a driving instructor, a professional who knows exactly what to do and shows them the good habits, right? The things that you're not told, you never know. You just don't know because you were never told. You were never told. Check your wing mirrors before you indicate, before you pull out, and only overtake 1 car at a time. Don't try and overtake 20 cars into oncoming traffic or you are dead, burger son. So, you know, it really is simple. But I think more than that, we need to put people through even through accidents, but definitely through defensive driving course, to learn how to handle skids and stuff like that, because without experience, your first instinct is to hammer on the brakes, panic and crash, and possibly die or kill others. You really need to know what to do and handle yourself, and unfortunately the only way of finding that out now is years and years and years of practice and experience until you actually get good at it. My argument is, why not teach people in the first place, and then they don't have to go through all of that. And the number of lives that we will save, there will be scores of lives saved, if not hundreds. And our road toll at the moment is horrendous. There's over 500,000 people dying on the roads every year. And the things I see, you know, I do a lot of driving through the countryside on the motorways, and the things I do just make me absolutely cringe sometimes. Now, Greg Murphy, I'm not into petrol heads, it's not my deal, but Greg Murphy would be the man to organise and the defensive driving, because he is a fantastic driver. And that's what we need. Good people teaching young people, not poor drivers. Unfortunately, that requires a little bit of regulation, but when you consider it's for everybody's good and it's going to save lives, I would suggest to you it is well worth it. And as I say, it's not just the accidents and the deaths. It's just the crashes. When you have a crash in a car, even if you're not driving, it really mucks with you mentally. You find yourself nervous and tense and shaky and self-doubting. Even when you drive, even if you've been in a crash and you didn't actually crash, it affects you so badly for so long. Unfortunately, I've been in some real bad ones. I wasn't driving, but yeah, they certainly taught me not to use excessive speed or do crazy overtaking manoeuvres. I mean, I do drive to the limit, not over, to the limit, and I drive pretty well, pretty swift. And, you know, I'm up the backside of most people most of the time because they just don't know what they're doing. So, you know, it's not just a rant from me. It's actually a concern for my fellow countrymen and women's lives. I think we need to protect each other better than what we are doing, and to show some kindness and some consideration on the roads, on the streets, to each other, because that is how we change our world. And I must say, I'm not too happy with the way the world is right now, and I'm doing what I can to make it better. But I can't do it without you. I need your help too. Now, Before I attack the story, which we're into in just a minute, I just want to say a big hello to all the people up in the beautiful Hawke's Bay up that way. I heard you had another earthquake, which is a bit concerning, and I hope you're all okay. I know how horrible those things are and how badly they can affect people's mental health too. And, you know, if someone needs to talk about things like that, just give them a bit of a listen, because sometimes you just need to get it out, and it really, really helps. I'd also like to say a big thank you to the sponsors and for Wairarapa TV and Michael and Veronica for putting all this on for us. I really do appreciate it, and it's great to be able to bring my stories and my ideas to the fine folks of the Wairarapa and the Hawke's Bay. It's really nice. It's a privilege to be a part of it. Right, we've got to crack on because time's ticking. Today's story is Victoria Falls and Wangi Game Park, which is, of course, in Africa. 4 of us, Seedy, Wayne, Dave and myself, drove west across the northern Kalahari. We had just come from Chobe National Game Park in Botswana and headed into Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. Mugabe had only been in power for a few years, and Zimbabwe, though now poor, still had signs of what a rich country it was when it was southern Rhodesia. The many years of war, however, had financially crippled the new Zimbabwe, and no improvement was in sight. This meant the tourists who did venture up had plenty to spend, and there was no shortage of accommodation. As we left Chobe, the desert started to take over again, so I drove from dawn till dark to get through to Victoria Falls. Victoria Falls is also named the Smoke That Thunders, and a few kilometres from the falls we could hear them and see the mist in the sky above. Victoria Falls are reputed to be the largest in the world, and they are truly a sight to behold. Even before we lay eyes on them, they impress with that mighty thundering sound as we approach. The mighty Zambezi River feeds this natural wonder, and at first it is hard to take it all in, as it is some 1,700 metres long and about 100 metres from top to bottom. The Zambezi spills over a level sheet of basalt, making the drop sharp and spectacular. It is so sharp, the falling water creates a permanent mist, rising high in the air to about 400 metres. It creates a rainbow above the falls by day, and a lunar moonbow can be seen on a full moon. The spray comes shooting upwards like inverted rain. Despite having been discovered by Livingstone as late as 1855, it has captivated tourists ever since, and we were no exceptions. We spent the best part of the first day there on the more spectacular Zimbabwe side, where it is possible to get right up to the edge of the falls and see to the bottom. It was slippery and dangerous at the edge, but well worth the risk for the view. We were there in late summer, so the falls had reduced to a series of about 9 discernible falls, each one of them impressive in itself, but the series together was truly breathtaking. At the end of the falls were a load of the biggest crocodiles I have ever seen, with the falls acting like a smorgasbord for the massive beasts. The next day we crossed up to Zambia via Victoria Falls Bridge, which allows a unique view up the falls. Zambia was in a worse financial state than Zimbabwe, and black market money traders haggled openly for hard currency right outside the border guard's building. We left the car at the border and took a taxi to the nearest town to get on the gin and tonics. We then returned to one of the safari lodges where we had a fine meal on the riverfront as we got drunk and watched the sun go down. Unfortunately, we drank way too much and got stuck in Zambia when we missed the border closing. We were forced to sleep in the open despite warning signs of roaming lions. We ended up instead being eaten alive by mosquitoes, but relieved the next morning. We spent a few days at Victoria Falls viewing them from every way possible, spellbound by the great length and volume of these falls. The weather was very hot and lent itself to drinking and wandering along the falls. Altogether too soon, it was time to leave Victoria Falls and head south to Whangi National Game Park. Whangi is dotted with natural waterholes called pans. Some of them are fed by natural springs and some by two large lakes in the north of the park. We were immediately impressed by the infrastructure of the park. We headed to the northern section and booked into Cinnamantella Camp. The camp was a fenced compound on the top of a hill with great views. It also had a small shop run by a local guy who we call Phil for short. He was a very happy and personable guy and sorted out a 2-bedroom hut for us, which had a fridge and even featured a hot bath. We decided to make Cinnamantella our base camp and concentrate on game spotting to the northern section of the park. At the nearest waterholes we were met with another luxury, viewing platforms. These platforms were 1 story high with stairs leading up to glass-enclosed rooms where it was safe to view all of the game that came down to drink. The platform also offered shade from the oppressive heat of midday sun. The watering holes, or pans, were like magnets for game. Each type of game had a turn at the watering hole, so it wasn't necessary to chase the game about. Whilst at one viewing platform, I met a biologist who was on holiday. He pointed out many different species of birds to me, which made for great viewing with binoculars. It opened up another layer of life to me and emphasised just how busy these watering holes really were. Whangi boasts many hundreds of species of birds, so there was a constant change of different birds to view. The larger game, however, were truly breathtaking. By being out of sight and smell from the larger animals, they would approach without fear or inhibition. The funniest to watch were the giraffes, which had great difficulty getting their long necks down to drink. They would buckle their front knees inwards and lower their long necks down, leaving them in a very vulnerable position. They will only drink when they are sure there are no lions on the prowl, usually in the heat of the day. On our first day at Whangi, we were treated by a smorgasbord of different game at the watering hole, from giraffes in the middle of the day to various antelope in the afternoon, to elephants in the early evening to sunset. Each species seemed to have a certain time of day they preferred to drink, so it was unnecessary to move from our superb viewing platform. They also seemed to have different personalities, with some like the gazelles, always tense and nervous, while the likes of the elephants were very relaxed and came down to bathe and play. At the end of the first superb day of game spotting, we returned to Cinnamantella Camp for dinner and the luxury of a hot bath. The camp being on a hill meant great viewing across the surrounding countryside, so we had great game spotting until sunset. The next day we got up early to make the most of the change of light when predators are on the prowl. Despite the early rise, we did not see a kill, as these are few and far between at this time of day. Instead, we spent a great day at the viewing platforms where we were treated to some amazing sights. At one stage, we saw some beautiful kudu come down to drink. First, the large males with their beautiful corkscrew horns came down and checked out the water for crocodiles, stamping and sipping cautiously. These beautiful antelope then formed up like sentinels, making a corridor for the females and young to walk down. The males stood guard facing outwards, while the females and young took a drink. When they finished, they melted away, slow and orderly like a military exercise. It was amazing to see the degree of caution and cooperation the kudu showed, something no zoo could ever show. Every species seemed to have an instinctive and sophisticated survival behaviour, which was amazing to witness. During the afternoon, on the second day, we heard a strange tapping sound on the hubcaps. of the car. We came down from the viewing platform to find the strangest looking birds tapping away at the tyre valves. Called hornbills, these medium-sized clowns, a little smaller than a chicken, had large bills like macaws. They showed no fear of us and happily pecked away until we grabbed them by the bill and moved them away. Undeterred, they came back for more until we tired of our little game and left them to peck away until they lost interest. The confidence of one animal seemed to flow onto others, and it was amazing to see so many different animals drinking with such a relaxed attitude. The huge numbers the waterholes attracted were quite staggering, and it was a real privilege to experience game spotting at its best. On our return to camp each night, we were spoiled with a hot bath by Phil, the store manager, who lit the fire to heat the drum of water. On a whim, we asked Phil if he could get us a couple of dozen beers. Ever helpful, he advised he would have some for us by the end of the next day. Unbeknown to us, he got his younger brother to cycle some 20 kilometres to the nearest safari lodge to pick some up for us. When we found this out, we paid the helpful lad $10 for his troubles, and he thought Christmas had come. As our stores got low, we tried some of the antelope Phil had hanging in the cool store and made ourselves sick on the unusually gamey meat. After that, we're a little bit more cautious with the exotic foods available. On the third day, we arrived back at camp just on sunset, and Phil was jumping around our lodge in an excited state. I parked up and jumped out as Phil shouted and pointed. With my binoculars handy and our high vantage point, I quickly picked up the lion he was pointing out. Down on the plain, a single lion was hunting a warthog. Slowly it crept up on its prey, using the long grass to disguise it. Once within striking distance, it broke cover and sprinted towards the unsuspecting hog. As soon as the hog spotted the lion, it squealed and sprinted off, but to no avail. The lion swiped the hog across the shoulder and sent it spiralling across the ground. With one quick leap, it was upon the hog and grabbing it by the throat, quickly choking the life out of its poor victim. A great amount of dust was kicked up by the scuffle that ensued, and I lost sight of the pair. After a tense minute or so, the lion appeared, dragging the hog by the throat. The entire kill took only a few minutes. It was a case of right time, right place. It was so captivating that those few minutes felt like an hour. With so much game around, the lions looked in splendid condition. They were massive animals which were difficult to spot as they used the long grass to camouflage themselves. By staying still, their colour blends in perfectly. To see a kill from the high vantage point of the camp made the whole thing perfect. Phil was very happy for me, as these kinds of scenes are very rare. We decided to stay at Cinnamantella Camp for as long as possible, as every day was full of great game spotting. Although there were huge amounts of game about, they seemed much better catered for by the system of watering holes about. Thanks to the watering holes, the game get precious water in the height of summer when it is needed most. But it was obvious the game park was well past its heyday when southern Rhodesia was rich. The Civil War had financially crippled the country, and the game park was a shadow of its former self. Even in the early years of Mugabe's reign, Zimbabwe struggled. Poverty in the country was rampant, and farmers were being driven off their land only to see it fall into rack and ruin. Their currency was not recognised in any other banks, and inflation was running rampant. The future for parks like Hwange National seemed tenuous at best. Unfortunately, civil war was rampant in southern Africa, with Angola and Mozambique at war and South Africa seemingly on the brink. The game parks rely on tourist dollars, and war frightens them off for many years. Special places like Hwange National Game Park would never be able to reach the glory days of old, when hunters paid huge prices to shoot trophy animals. In stark contrast to the rampant poverty in society, Countries like Zimbabwe are rich in natural minerals like copper, platinum and gold. Huge profitable mines employing tens of thousands of miners are all over southern Africa, but the region is fraught with social problems. Illiteracy is rampant and people in their millions live in slum conditions. All the time civil unrest boils away, simmering over now and then. Zimbabwe was like a microcosm of southern Africa itself, with gems like Victoria Falls and Hwange National Game Park and huge mineral wealth. A country with massive potential that should be rich, but instead was poisoned by minority rule, then ravaged by ugly civil war. Finally ending up with a dictator was the final nail in the coffin for Zimbabwe. It is impossible to visit southern Africa and not be awe-inspired by its natural beauty. So too, it is impossible not to feel for all of the poor souls who suffer poor governments. I feel like I lost some of my innocence there, and there seems no easy solution for the problems of the region. In the many years since I visited the region, the ANC's Mandela government came and went and delivered hope without solutions. Many South Africans of all races emigrated to Australia and New Zealand. Successive governments have failed on schooling, health and employment. Zimbabwe, slowly strangled by Mugabe's rule, has suffered badly, but places like Hwange still exist as destinations for those keen for adventure. For my part, my feeling is of great contrast. I will never forget the falls and the beauty of Hwange Park. I hold out hope for these magnificent places and their beautiful country. Yet I feel such sorrow as the people of Zimbabwe suffer. I hope someday soon democracy will help them to a better place. I know I will never forget our adventures in the blazing sun. I leave some part of me there and take the memory of those amazing sunsets and return. The end. Well, that's me for another week, and I'm off. I'm sure going to enjoy my time. I have a great old time seeing my good old mates up north, and who knows, we may even win the World Cup. Wouldn't that be fantastic to do the three-peat? It really would be great to see. You know, it disappoints me when I hear people say that, they're not interested in rugby and stuff, because when you consider we're not very good at very much in this world, we are insignificant and we matter not to pretty much everyone else on this globe, but we are world beaters at one thing at least, and we're pretty crash hot at netball too, just by the by. But, you know, I would encourage people to don't rub people's nose in it, but just be proud of the fact that, you know, we are so good, so passionate at what we do, and it's a sport of honour, respect, loyalty, being there for your mates, all the good things in life. And I must admit, when they do that haka, it still sends a chill down my spine, and I hear those words echo, I am alive, and I think it's a pretty neat thing myself. Well, that's me for another week. I hope you enjoyed my show, and I just remind you that kindness costs you nothing. Okay, so give it a go, and just might make someone else's life better, and maybe even yours. So just try it. Thank you. Thank you to Michael and Veronica, Wairarapa TV, and all the sponsors. I hope you spread the good word, and everyone gets behind Arrow Radio and supports something that is here for the community, here for you. I hope you enjoy it and you support it, and long may it continue. Thanks, and bye for now. See ya.